Happy New Year, college basketball fans. Welcome back to another video. Today we're taking a look at your guys' hot takes. I asked you guys for your hottest take heading into this year, and you guys gave me some pretty good ones. So we're going to take a look at them, and I'm going to rate them from 1 to 10 based on how likely I think it is for them to happen. If they're a 10, that means I think it's an extremely hot take. I don't think it's going to happen. If it's a 1, I'd say that it's pretty likely to happen this year. And without further ado, subscribe if you guys are new. Let's get into these hot takes. And it's coming in here from E-Man, and he says Rutgers will be a bid steal and upset a 2 or 3 seed in the round of 32 and make it to the Sweet 16. So this one is a pretty interesting take. I do think that Rutgers has potential to get a bid steal, and they might not even have to win the Big Ten tournament to get in if they can play pretty good throughout league play. Their last 2 games have been kind of up and down. They had Princeton, which they lost to. Not a good win, not a good loss there to lose to Princeton, although they could come out of the Ivy League. But then they beat another Ivy League team in Columbia pretty bad the other day and looked really good while doing it. Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper are 2 of the best freshmen in the country. So if they do get there, I'd say it is possible. I'd say I'd rate this one about a 9 though, because even if Rutgers can sneak into the tournament one way or another, I don't know if I would pick them to make it to the Sweet 16 because, yes, they do have some good star players that are going to be really good at the next level, but I don't know if they have the complete team to make a run in March. Next up, we got one that we got from a couple people, and I believe 4 different people said this, and pretty much along the runs of Michigan is going to make a run this year in March Madness and make a run all the way to the Final Four or at least to the Elite 8. And my opinions on this one, I think it's definitely possible. I think that there is a chance that Michigan can make a run. Dusty May, their new head coach this year, has made a run to the Final Four with FAU before, and they have a really good team this season full of some transfers, like Danny Wolf from Yale, who has kind of been their main guy and really playing point guard from the center position. They're a really fun team to watch, and usually those type of teams can do some damage in March Madness, especially a historically pretty good team like Michigan. So I'm going to rate this one, all the way to the Final Four. That's a pretty hot take, but I do think it is possible. I'm going to rate it about an 8.9 on the hotness scale. I don't think it's very likely to happen, but I want to leave some room there because I do think it is possible. This one is coming in here from Isaiah Hoops Official, and he says Simo, also known as Southeast Missouri State, becomes just the 3rd 16 seed to ever beat a 1 seed this year in March Madness, and he also says he calls his shot on the 1 seed that they will beat, and that is Iowa State. So I don't think that Simo is going to beat Iowa State. If those 2 teams did play in the first round of March Madness, I think Iowa State is a really good, well-rounded team with some stars and a lead point guard. It is going to be very tough for Iowa State to lose to a 16 seed. However, Simo does have a chance to come out of the Ohio Valley Conference. It is between them and probably Morehead State, and then there's always some sleeper teams that could get a bid steal out of that league. But yeah, Simo, it is possible they could make the March Madness tournament. As far as them just making the March Madness tournament, I'd rate it about around a 7. But as far as them making it as a 16 seed and beating a 1 seed, I'm going to have to rate that a 9.9. I don't think that is going to happen. We got one coming in here from Iowa State fan, and he says Kentucky loses in the 2nd round. And I actually think that this is pretty possible. I think that Mark Pope is doing an excellent job. He has a really well-coached team, and they do have a lot of talented players, mainly out of the transfer portal, and a lot of senior players that have experience in March Madness, which makes me believe they're probably going to make it to the Sweet 16 at least. But if they catch the right team in the 2nd round or even in the 1st round, Kentucky definitely could get upset. I'm going to rate this, my most likely to happen so far this video, I'm going to rate it about a 6.5. I think it is very possible that Kentucky can lose before the 2nd weekend of March this year. Next one, we got one coming in here from BC Sports Prod, and we got a lot of Iowa talk here in this video, and he says all 4 Iowa teams that are in Division I college basketball will make it to the tournament this year, and Iowa State is almost a lock already at this point to get in, and Drake looks pretty good out of the Missouri Valley Conference. So your other 2, the Iowa Hawkeyes and also Northern Iowa, those are going to be your more iffy ones. I'm not even sure that Iowa is going to get in as an at-large bid unless they do pretty good in league play. So I'm going to rate this about a 9.3. I think Drake and Iowa State for sure get in. Iowa's going to be close to the bubble, but I think they're more of an NIT team this year, and I'm not sure about Northern Iowa. It is possible they can get in as a bid steal in their league, but I'm going to keep them out for now, so I'm going to rate this about a 9.5. Got one from Jamari, and he says Michigan State will win the Big Ten Conference and make it to the Final Four. In my opinion, the Big Ten is pretty wide open. I think that there are plenty of teams that could make a run for the Big Ten regular season and Big Ten tournament championships. I mean, you got Michigan State, you got Michigan, you got Oregon, who is at the top of the league right now. You got Purdue, who you can't sleep on Purdue in league play. Maryland, Illinois. Those are all teams that I believe are in the mix and have a shot at winning the Big Ten championship this year, and I feel like it's pretty wide open, and whoever does could have a legit shot to make it to the Final Four. I think one of those teams will at least make it to the Elite Eight, if not two of them. So it's going to be very interesting down the stretch in the Big Ten. As far as the Power 5 conferences, I feel like the Big Ten is the most wide open. So Michigan State, they have some solid players on their team. They're a well-rounded team, and they're coached by one of the best to ever do it in Tom Izzo. So I think that it is definitely possible that this could be the year that Tom Izzo gets back to the Final Four, I believe for the first time since 2019, which isn't that long ago, but Tom Izzo does this quite often. So it has been, past due for him. I'm going to rate this about a 9.1 though still, because I'm going to leave some room there. I think it's possible, but I think Michigan State can make a run, but all the way to the Final Four, along with winning this, very, what feels like evened out Big Ten conference, you're asking for a lot, so I'm going to have to rate it pretty highly. We got one coming in here from Jacob, and I seen this added on to somebody else's that I think we'll talk about later, but Oklahoma, if they do make the tournament, which it's looking like they will lose in the first round. So I've seen this as a pretty popular take here on my channel lately, saying that Oklahoma is frauds. Oklahoma, they're going to lose in the first round. Even if they get a top 5 seed, they would be, in prime position for a, mid-major team to upset them as a 12, 13, 14 seed in the first round. I could definitely see that happening. They do have a really good freshman in Fears that is playing really well. Porter Moser, this is, I think, the best team that he's had since he became the coach of Oklahoma. So I'm not sure. I think you guys might be sleeping on Oklahoma a little bit, but if they do get the right, a really good mid-major team come in there, play first round, I think that they can knock off Oklahoma. I'm going to rate this pretty low, about a 6.9, because I think that Oklahoma, it is definitely possible that they get into SEC play also and drop down to a 6 or a 7 seed even by the time league play is over, and then it's definitely possible that they can lose to a 10 seed or even an 11 seed in the first round. So I'm going to rate this pretty high, pretty lower, more likely to happen down around 6.9. Got one coming in here from Andrew, and he says Purdue barely makes the tournament and still gets to the Elite Eight. I think they're going to be more comfortably in. I expect them to be around a 5 to 7 seed, at the very minimal an 8 seed, which I guess you consider that maybe, barely getting in for Purdue standards this year. They have a really good point guard, one of the best in the country in Braden Smith, but I don't know if it's going to be enough. Even Trey Kaufman-Renn, although he does score quite a bit, he's just like, it's a big difference between him and a guy like Zach Edey. I'm not sure if Purdue can make a run all the way to the Elite Eight this year. I'm just not feeling a big run on the Boilermakers this season. I think there are other Big Ten teams that are going to be better and more primed to make a run with this year's teams, and I'm going to rate this pretty highly at like a 9.4. I don't think Purdue gets back to the Elite Eight this year. I think that, at best, I'd say Sweet 16 for Purdue, but I'm going to leave a little wiggle room there. There's always room for a team to come out and surprise me. We got one coming in here from Gabe, and he says Auburn is as good as UConn was last year and will steamroll through March Madness and easily win every game all the way to the championship. So that's a pretty hot take in my opinion. Auburn does look really good right now. In my opinion, they are the best team in the country, but I'm not sure they're as good as UConn was last year. They could be, but I don't think they steamroll through every team. Maybe through the first 2 rounds, maybe even through the Sweet 16, but once they get to the Elite 8, they get to the Final Four in the championship, I don't see them steamrolling everybody. So I'm going to have to rate this, and I'm not even for sure Auburn's going to win the championship this year. I think they're the favorite. They should be the favorite, but I'm going to have to rate this pretty highly at like a 9.4, just because there are plenty of teams that are going to be contenders this year for the championship. It's always possible Auburn could get upset or even just play in a few close games along the way, and yeah, I'm going to have to rate that pretty highly. Next one's coming in here from James, and he says, we will have an all-SEC Final Four. This is pretty interesting because, like I've said, I believe that at least 12 to 13 teams out of the 16 teams in the SEC will make it to the NCAA tournament this season. It is really looking like that way. So for 4 of them to all make it to the end would be pretty interesting. I mean, you got Florida, Oklahoma, who are both undefeated, Tennessee's who are also undefeated up to this point in the season. You got Auburn, who we just talked about as the best team in the country. You got Texas A&M, who has one of the more underrated resumes in the country. You got Kentucky, who's historically good with a new head coach and a lot of depth on this team. There are plenty of teams out of the SEC that could go deep this year in March Madness, and even at the bottom of the conference, you really start to look at it. I didn't even mention Alabama at the top of the conference either, who I believe has a chance to win the national championship. So at first you say, okay, Final Four of all the same teams, that's not going to happen. It could possibly happen. The SEC is pretty stacked this year. I don't think it is going to happen, but this is a pretty fun hot take. I'm still going to have to rate it about a 9.6. I'm going to leave a little bit of room there, but somebody from another conference is going to make it to the Final Four this year as well. But it would not surprise me if we do see at least 2 SEC teams in the Final Four this year. One coming in here from Jedi, and he says only 3 ACC teams make the tournament, with the highest seed being a 5. Duke and Clemson will be 2 of those 3. So I'm going to have to disagree. I think 4 teams I feel pretty comfortable about making March Madness this year, that being Duke, Clemson, as you mentioned, also Pitt and North Carolina. I think those 4 teams are going to make March Madness this season. They have pretty decent resumes so far. Although North Carolina's been losing, I think they're really going to pick it up in ACC and at least get in as a bubble team at the minimum. So I do think more than 3 ACC teams are going to get in. I think at least 4. And then you have that next level of teams like SMU and Louisville, which I don't think are going to make the tournament, but, you know, possibly a bid steal in there. We saw NC State with the bid steal last year and make it all the way to the Final Four. But I think more than 4 teams will get, or more than 3 teams will get in from the ACC. And I also do think that Duke is going to get a higher seed than a 5 seed. Right now, they're more projected around a 2 or a 3. I think they're going to stay around a 2 or a 3 throughout the entire season, especially if they roll through most of the ACC. So I'm going to have to disagree there with this one and rate it pretty highly, about 9.7. 2 coming in here from Mr. Mellons. He says Winthrop will win the Big South and maybe get an upset in the tournament. And then he says Vanderbilt gets a top 3 seed in the SEC tournament. So I'm going to have to disagree definitely with the Vanderbilt one. I think Vanderbilt's going to get, kind of a hard road here when they get into league play, and they're going to be more of around a bubble seat team for the NCAA tournament. The SEC is just too stacked right now. I don't see them getting a top 3 seed. Maybe a top 5, but even then, that seems like it's kind of pushing it for Vanderbilt. So I'm going to have to disagree there and have to go with really a 9.6. I don't see that one happening. As far as Winthrop winning the Big South, I think that one's a little bit more likely. I'm going to rate that more down to about an 8.4. I think that they are in a pretty good position to maybe get a bid steal out of that league, but I am pretty high on the High Point Panthers. I think that they are going to make their first ever NCAA tournament this year. Should have been last year, didn't get it done. I think this year they'll get it done in the Big South tournament and make it in. So I'll have to rate that about an 8.4. Got one coming in here from Peyton, and he says Dayton has a Loyola Chicago type run. I could see this one happening. I think Dayton is going to get a higher seed than what Loyola was in 2018 when they made their run. I believe they were an 11 seed to the Final Four, but I could definitely see Dayton make it to the Final Four. If you guys watched my March Madness bracket predictions, you've seen I've had Dayton in, I believe, the Final Four the last 2 predictions I've done. The most recent ones that I've done, I could definitely see it happening. I think they're going to have a little bit higher of a seed because they've played a really good non-conference schedule and got some really good non-con wins. So Dayton is in prime position for if they can run a really good A10 conference. The A10 is a good conference this year, a really stacked league. I could see Dayton really getting up to a 7 or a 6 seed even, but I could definitely see them making a run. So I'm going to rate this about a 7.9. Our next one's coming in here from Who Dat and America's Team, and he says Florida is a Final Four team, but Oklahoma is a first round exit team. That's kind of what I was talking about earlier when I was talking about Oklahoma being a first round exit. I've been seeing that around. So we'll talk about the other one though, since we kind of already talked about Oklahoma. Florida is a Final Four team. I could see it. Florida, they have one of the more underrated backcourts in the entire country. The trio of Walter Clayton, also Will Richard, and Elijah Martin. That's a really solid trio of guards there. We all know how important guard play is in March Madness. They've proven themselves so far. They're definitely a sleeper. They could do it, make a run this year. I am going to rate it more so like a 7.9. I want to leave some room there for it to happen, but I think Florida is a Sweet 16 team, maybe an Elite 8 team, but I'm not sure about a Final Four team. One's coming in from Jabertot, and he says Memphis will make a run to the Final Four and maybe even the Natty. I've been seeing a lot of Memphis fans on my page really hyped up about this team, and the backcourt of Tyrese Hunter and PJ Haggerty has been amazing. I do think that this is one of the better teams, probably it is the best team that Penny Hardaway has had, and you got some good bigs down low with Dane Danger, the transfer from Illinois. He could be a problem in March Madness. He has really good post work. He can rebound well. He's a big guy. This team could make a run all the way to the Final Four of the national championship, though. I know that they're you guys have been letting me know they're 8-2 in quad 1 wins, or quad 1 and quad 2 games. Really good record. I think the best in the country so far. I think they're primed to make a run to the Sweet 16 this year, which I think would be a pretty good year. The best year that Penny Hardaway's had so far would be in the Sweet 16. But as far as the Final Four, I could see it. They need the right path, though, so I'm going to rate it a little higher, about a 9. But as far as to make it to the Sweet 16, I'd rate that more so like a 5.5. I feel pretty good about Memphis going at least on a little bit of a run here to the second weekend of March. We got one coming in here from Manny Man, and he says Oregon gets a 1 seed. That would be pretty impressive. Oregon has some really good non-con wins, and their best one is against Alabama. That is going to hold up very well. So if they can win the Big Ten Conference with a pretty good record and win the Big Ten tournament also, they're looking really good to get a 1 seed. But I think that Oregon is definitely going to get a top 3 seed. This is a really good team, and a lot of people I feel like haven't opened their eyes enough up to Oregon yet, even though they only have 1 loss, and it was to a buzzer beater. But Oregon is legit, and I could see them going on a run this year. Get a 1 seed, though. They're going to have to win the Big Ten Conference. Like I mentioned earlier, the Big Ten's kind of all over the place. It's wide open, so I'm going to rate it a little bit higher here, about a 9.1. But I do think they are the favorite to win the Big Ten, but I'm not even sure that the winner of the Big Ten gets a 1 seed. They might be more so a 2 or a 3. Our last one's coming in here from Cleanest Edit, and he says Baylor has a comeback, the pieces of the puzzle click, and they make it to the Final Four. Baylor was my preseason national championship pick. I thought that Scott Drew had the right pieces together on this team between transfers and freshmen incoming this year and even some returning players. But their defense hasn't looked all that great. I thought their defense would be solved. VJ Edgecombe hasn't been the most efficient player in the world, but he's starting to pick it up a little bit. But I do think they have a veteran point guard in Jeremy Roach. They have a veteran big in Norchad O'Meara, who have both been to the Final Four. Jeremy Roach has been to the Final Four with Duke, and Norchad Omier has been to the Final Four with Miami. They have experience on this team. They have two really good freshmen between VJ Edgecombe and Rob Wright, and I think they have the pieces to do it. If they can get it together, I don't hate this pick at all. And for our last one, I'm going to go pretty low. To the Final Four is hard, but I am going to go a little lower at like 7.5. They are my preseason national championship champion pick. I don't think they're going to win the championship, but if they can get together with the right path, they can make it to the Final Four. So I'm going to leave some room there. I'm going to go 7.5 just because I do think that Scott Drew has the right type of team that could make a run this year, so I will leave some room for that. But let me know what you guys think about these hot takes, and be on the lookout if you guys want a chance to be in the next hot takes video. You can turn on the post notifications. I believe it will give you a notification for the community post, but that is where you guys will let me know your hot takes to be in the next video. I'll post a community post asking for them. You post your comment down there. I'll pick and choose a few, put them in the video, so be on the lookout for those, guys. Subscribe if you guys are new. We got a ton more college basketball content coming your way in 2025. And yeah, guys, thank you so much for watching.